Hey everyone, thanks for joining the webinar. My name is Brian Mahone. Just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. If you have a question throughout the webinar, feel free to use the chat feature below. It'll be 25, 30 minutes of content, and then I'll open up the microphones for any live question and answer. So I'll give another minute for, it looks like some people are joining, and we'll start right at 10. All right. Well, as I mentioned, my name is Brian Mahone. I am a certified insurance counselor at Engel Hambright and Davies. I've been in the industry for 5 years. I originally grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, and got started off in the insurance industry, focused on helping technology and life science companies. So I've been kind of serving this innovation space, and actually I'm in a specialized cyber cope insurance certification program right now through Carnegie Mellon University's uh, College of Information Systems, and a partnership with an insurance carrier named Chubb. It's about 100 hours practicing cyber security risk management and governance and operations, with a goal really to serve, our prospective and current cyber insurance clients. So without further ado, I wanted to get into our agenda today, going over the cyber threats landscape, right? Who's doing all of this hacking, why and how. A little bit of the local privacy Pennsylvania data breach laws, some very briefly security controls, and of course really the bulk of the content of what exactly is cyber insurance, why consider it, how much do you really need, and then some Q&A at the end. So getting into kind of who are these hackers or bad actors, there's this kind of myth that it's some lone guy in a hoodie and some laptop in some foreign country, but really the other picture, it's a full-time business. It's a huge industry. I mean, there's call centers set up abroad. These people go to work every day just like you and me, and put in their 8 hours. So the different type of bad actors or hackers, very briefly wanted to go through advanced persistent threats, APT. They're kind of the most advanced bad actors, if you will. Kind of low and slow approach. They're long-term operations. They're well funded. It's thought that the solar breach attack that left dozens of U.S. government agencies this year vulnerable was an APT group. And then there's just organized crime, spam, phishing, spyware, malware, identity fraudsters. They're just out to make a quick buck. Of course, they target healthcare and financial institutions as big targets, and really their goal is just to make money. There's also kind of corporate espionage and industrial spy groups that are attacking intellectual property, trade secrets, other countries' infrastructures. There was a huge thing in the news with China and Huawei, those types of things. So larger publicly traded companies, usually part of the U.S. infrastructure, and actually learned recently that 80% of the U.S. infrastructure is privately owned, right? So, even though these industrial spy groups, are probably looking to harm the U.S. government, they're often harming, businesses of ours. And then, people use the term hackers broadly, but there's a few different types of hackers. Kind of the most elementary are script kiddies. These are, your teenagers with a gaming laptop and YouTube that kind of, play around on the internet and try to do things nefariously, usually for notoriety and for fun, not really trying to bring down any sort of company or have any sort of MO. They just enjoy technology. And then there's kind of white hat and black hat hackers. You might have heard that term before. White hats are usually kind of cybersecurity researchers, kind of the good guys, where black hats or professional hackers that try to penetrate networks. Oftentimes they can turn into good guys if a company were to pay them. And then just the nerdy kind of computer coders, virus worm writers as well. And then something that's often overlooked, insiders, disgruntled employees, maybe they're upset they didn't get a raise, or they uh, have something against the owner, or maybe the company's doing something that they don't agree with morally. Like a good example of an insider threat would be Edward Snowden, a famous NSA contractor during Obama's term. So those are kind of the different types. Of course, why are they doing this? Often these bad hackers are doing things for money to try to steal your data. And this graph just kind of outlines the various ways that stolen data can be monetized or used. It does say health information, personal health information at the top, but that can easily be replaced with personal identifiable information or personal financial information. So just looking at the chart briefly, they can go after, patients or doctors, commit insurance fraud, prescription fraud, forgery, getting access to pharmaceuticals and selling them, medical device fraud, which, could turn into a type of bodily injury if a pacemaker is hacked. This is actually a concern under George Bush, I believe. Dick Cheney, the vice president, had a medical device they were concerned would be hacked. Financial fraud, bankrupt, tax ID fraud, credit card fraud, reputation hijacking. You see this a lot with like YouTubers online. If you've ever heard of the concept of doxing, kind of reputational harm, spreading misinformation online and misinterpreting someone's reputation. And then they can also just get your data and then pass it on to somebody else and sell it. There's big data brokers. So that kind of gets into how the data is monetized. And there is this myth as well that cyber attacks are a big company problem. You've heard all these names in the news: SolarWinds and Under Armour in the city of Baltimore, and JBL Meatpacking Colonial Pipeline. But the truth is that cyber liability and data breaches is a small business concern. This article did a good job. It was posted by I believe, CNBC in 2019. I'm not going to read the slides to you, but essentially, cyber attacks are putting small businesses out of business. They're costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars, and globally, this industry is just growing by trillions every year. Getting into a little bit more specific data, there's a ton of good studies out there. One of them is the cost of a data breach study by the Ponyman Institute. About 540 organizations are surveyed each year, and these are just the quick highlights. And you can Google it and get a free copy of the full article. But essentially, this year over last year, there's been a 10% increase in the average total cost of a breach. A rough kind of differentiator of $1 million where remote work was a factor in making the data breach more severe, which of course with COVID, a ton of companies have launched hybrid and full remote work. Our agency ourselves has gone to a hybrid model as well. Working from home today, essentially. 11 consecutive years, the healthcare industry is the highest industry with the cost of a breach, which isn't surprising. There's just, personal health information is the most valuable to these bad actors. 38% lost business share of the total breach cost. So that gets into kind of the reputational harm, right? Where you've been hacked and now your name's in the news and clients are weary of doing business with you. A way to figure out, the cost of a data breach to your company is looking at the per record cost. So this ranges between 100 and 200. This most recent study saying, if you have a data breach of one personal identifiable record or financial information or health information, it'll cost roughly $180 to kind of rectify that. So multiply that by, you know, the thousands or dozens or hundreds of records your company might have that are protected. And then 20% of data breaches are caused by compromised credentials. So we'll get into that. You can actually easily, for free, see if your credentials are out there on the dark web, and I'll show you how to do that at the end. So getting into kind of how these bad guys are making all of this money and causing havoc on all of these businesses. As you're probably not surprised, phishing attacks have been going up in frequency and severity. Again, there's that average 150 costs per record. A lot of these are email based. They can also be phone or text based as well. You might have, you know, been victim to a classic one that's going around regarding your bank and Amazon, and oh, did you buy this? No, let us connect with your bank, and it's completely fraudulent, even though they sound, you know, speaking clear English and sound legit, and you think they're from Amazon. That's a text or phone-based phishing example. And then ransomware, this was the big Colonial Pipeline got hit by ransomware. So this is where your system gets locked out, and there's this big question of to pay or not to pay. It looks like, you know, maybe a fourth end up paying because they have no choice. There's a ransomware attack launched every 11 seconds in recent times, and about half of businesses in a recent survey were potential threats or potential targets of ransomware, with about a $178,000 average ransomware demand. The next one I want to talk about was a distributed denial of service attack, where essentially a hacker takes control of multiple or dozens of machines and then uses all of those machines or computers at once to overwhelm a specific server. So maybe it's your server where all your client data is. These are going up in frequency, again, costing between $100K and $2 million if your company were to suffer from one, where about 100 days of inactivity, essentially, the technology you rely on to do business is shut down for about 100 days if one of these gets hold of your system. And 16 of these are launched every minute. Again, getting back to the insider threat, Edward Snowden, these ones are particularly hard to defend against. Some of them are insider threats that are on accident, right? You might have an employee that's not very tech savvy that accidentally, you know, deletes some proprietary information on a server, or again, they might be a disgruntled employee intentionally trying to harm the company. And funds transfer fraud, this one's interesting. I connected with an IT company locally where they had a help desk employee that, you know, still worked at home and, you know, didn't really check his bank account all that often, you know, went to work, did his thing, and 2 months go by and he said, hey, I didn't get any of my paychecks. Well, 2 months prior, their bookkeeper accountant that handles their payroll got an email from him saying, hey, I got a new bank account. Can you change my direct deposit? And of course it was a bad actor impersonating the employee and kind of committed this funds transfer fraud. So it can be done with W-2 information, which usually every company has on employees. And again, this is going up like crazy in the last year or two. So just a couple quick examples. This is what a phishing email might look like. You've probably, hopefully, have training at work. I know a big vendor of security awareness training is a company called KnowBe4. EHD personally uses them, and a ton of companies do. But you'll kind of see that there's always a call to action. If you look at the details, the sender is usually misspelled, might be an I instead of an L. And no, real person you actually know sometimes isn't even listed. And then this is just a quick graph on the distributed denial of service attack, right? So here's your bad guy in a hoodie. He's using all of these kind of inactive bot computers, and then there's your server. And then Ransomware, extortion, this is kind of what it might look like. Pay your Bitcoin here. Here's the time left. A lot of times these ransomwares can be negotiated. So you certainly do want to try to interact with the bad actor, even though it's scary with a time limit. They often get negotiated down. And looking at the cyber threat legal landscape, so right, these bad actors are a threat, but also regulators can be a threat. So virtually every state has some sort of Privacy Information Act. Pennsylvania's is called Pennsylvania Breach of Personal Information Notification Act. I believe it was passed in 2018 or 19. And there's also more strict ones, California, New York, GDPR in the European Union, but Pennsylvania's is less strict than those three. But essentially, it will tell you, who this law applies to and what personal information is subject to the law. And really, I'm not going to read the slides to you, but it's pretty broad of who it applies to. And there's the information it applies to is really anybody's kind of name in combination with a number of other things, social, driver's license, banking information. And the law does obligate companies to notify those individuals that were affected. And we did see a good example. I mean, not really a small business example, but this has been enforced. And one good example we have is actually with Uber. They basically had a data breach and didn't disclose it, tried to push it under the rug, and it got wrapped up into a class action lawsuit. But for Pennsylvania specifically, who kind of joined the class action, it's got 13.5 million in penalties against Uber, which was about $1,000 for each of the 13,500 Pennsylvanian Uber drivers whose driver's license information was accessed by hackers. So this is kind of a formula of the penalty you might face if you do not notify as obligated by the law. So about $1,000 per individual record. Moving on, I know that a lot of this has been kind of study and data driven, but I want to tell you a couple personal stories from past clients of mine. Actually, this is a family member that runs a beverage distributing company, right? So he's the middleman between the beverage manufacturers and all of the retail restaurants and liquor stores and those that actually sell the beverages. So they have about 40 trucks, kind of mid-sized company. After 20 years in the business, him and his business partner decided to make a big acquisition, right? They wanted to grow, and they got the go ahead, and they actually ended up doubling the size of their business. And 2 months into the merger, everything's going well. There's an employee on third shift that receives an email from the second shift guy about a product in the trucking industry. He said, "Hey, check this out." He clicked on the link. Of course, it was ransomware, immediately locked down all of their systems, requesting a $250,000 Bitcoin payment in order to gain back access to the entire company's computer systems. So they relied on kind of a purchase order system between their manufacturer partners and their clients. It was all digital. So to get back online, it took all the sales and the admin and even field people working 7 days a week to recreate 2 years worth of invoices and customer data, countless calls and visits with the local FBI, months of the executive team's time and energy wasted. Basically easing customers' concerns was a big part of the executive team's time. They ended up replacing all the hardware in the company, about $20,000. They ended up paying 60 grand of paid overtime to these employees that were working around the clock to recreate this data. And this was all with insurance helping pay the business interruption to offset the damage done. And I was talking to this business owner, and he said it ended up being the most chaotic 2 weeks in the entire business's history. And it was it was really tough for them, and they've certainly done a lot of things to avoid ones in the future. One other story I wanted to share with you briefly was a large client I had at a previous insurance agency. They were a digital signage company, again, with a really aggressive CEO, kind of buying companies left and right all over the world. And one of the acquisitions was in Malvern, Pennsylvania. And a new financial controller at this new subsidiary received an email from the CFO. Her new boss said, "Hey, we got a new client. Can you wire 100 grand to this bank in Hong Kong? Thanks." And they did business in Asia, so it wasn't the most crazy request. And she didn't want to not listen to her new boss. So of course this email was fraudulent. The new controller didn't know, and she was just doing what her new boss told her to do. And they did not have insurance at the time. They fought with their bank, wasted a ton of the CFO's time, and ended up with $50,000 uninsured loss. Basically, the bank was able to recuperate half of it. So I don't want this story, obviously, to any of these stories really to happen to your business. So what can you do? Of course, you want to have good cybersecurity controls in place. A lot of small and medium-sized businesses often rely on a managed service provider and outsourced IT people to handle this. And so, of course, we won't go into detail because we're insurance people, but it is important that whoever is handling your IT infrastructure, that they're following some sort of cybersecurity framework. There's a bunch of them out there. You might have heard of NIST, government contracting defense industry, the CMMC, Cyber Maturity Model Certification. And there's another one called the Center for Internet Security's top security controls. These are the first 18 of them. And we like this one because they rank them by importance. Implement this one first, then this one second, then this one third. And it's free. It also gives kind of guidelines on how to implement these. So you'll see that step one is really you need to figure out what your technology and data assets are, because if you don't know what they are, you can't protect them. And then you start kind of working your way down. And you can, of course, just Google CIS security controls and get all of this stuff for free online. But it's no surprise that when you go to apply for cyber insurance, they ask you about your cybersecurity controls. So this is a screenshot from a carrier called CFC. And you can kind of see some of the things on that control list. Do you have these in place or not? Do you have an incident response plan? Do you have endpoint protection on, laptops, smartphones? What kind of firewalls and filtering are you do? Do you have two-factor authentication? So it often takes help of an IT person to even apply for cyber insurance. Another example from a carrier called Chubb. Do you have these? Yes, no, unknown. A lot of times, yes and no doesn't really cut it. So we always encourage insureds to write on the application, Mark, I don't know, but here's what we do. Is that the same thing as what this question's asking? So, getting into probably why most of you might have signed up. What is cyber insurance? And when you think about it, I want you to think about, post-breach and pre-breach. So to kind of set the stage, imagine that you're at home and your house floods. Actually, 3-4 months ago, we had some record rain here in Lancaster County. If you go downstairs, your basement's filled with water, you need to call a restoration company to remove that water, throw out the damaged property, maybe do some drywall, dry out the space, some painting, mold removal. And most of us are familiar with, how to find the right contractor, ask family or friends, call Roto-Rooter, ServPro, it's not quite as a gray situation. But what happens if your company has a data breach? No one can send invoices, check email, or log in. You're kind of dead in the water and you don't really know who to call. The first thing you need to really figure out is what happened with an expensive forensic specialist. They tell you how a system was hacked, what data was taken. Think about your favorite lawyer's hourly rate and then double it. These forensics experts are very expensive. You also, of course, need to notify those impacted by the breach, patients, customers, vendors. You might want to use a call center, notification service providers, because you don't want to bog down your staff. And of course, you need to do that to avoid regulators, or you're complied to do that by regulators. You might have to offer, might want to offer credit monitoring and kind of smooth things over with those customers. And additionally, data breach legal services are needed to mitigate any lawsuits from regulators or customers. And at the same time, if the local news channel catches wind of your breach, you might need a public relations firm to kind of smooth things over with the public and protect your reputation and avoid losing customers. All while, you can't run your business and you're not making money because that critical technology you use every day isn't accessible. You still have to pay your overhead, your taxes, your insurance, your rent, your salaries. And that's really where cyber insurance enters the scene, right? So all of those post-breach service providers that we just talked about would be at your fingertips with a cyber insurance policy. So getting into more of the details of these post-breach services, right? So cyber insurance is designed to cover consumers of technology services or products, and it's financial loss coverage for your company in the event that these personal, whether it's identifiable information, health information, financial information was breached, and you have to respond to that. So you've got this pre-breach, post-breach. For post-breach, when you look at cyber insurance, you actually have first-party insuring clauses and third-party insuring clauses. And I want to touch on third-party first. So when you think of third-party, I want you to think about coverage for your customers, your vendors, people you do business with, your partners, these third parties, right? So the privacy liability, it's often referred to, would pay for claims for a third party in the event of a release of this non-public information, right? So it's that these PII, PHI, and PFI for those vendors and third parties. The content and web publishing, multimedia liability, and the reason there's so many words there is that cyber insurance carriers don't have any common terminology yet. The product's too new and it's still being developed. So this media liability, I guess is what I'll call it, provides broader digital coverage for personal advertising injury liability, which covers third-party claims of infringement or violation of another's copyright, title, slogan, trademark, trade name, trade dress, unauthorized use of music, or defamation, libel, slander, wrongful imprisonment, detainment. There is some of this coverage on a general liability policy, but this kind of brings it in to the 21st century, broadening it digitally, right? All these companies have social media. They have maybe product reviews where customers can comment, and maybe someone's talking trash on a competitor online. That's kind of what this is getting at. Security breach, liability information security network breach. This is the coverage that if you're breached, and because you're breached, your third parties, your clients, your vendors, your partners also were breached, that's going to help them get back up and running. So pays for claims resulting from third-party liability resulting from responsibility of a virus, security breach, or transmittal of malicious code. So that's kind of the third-party world, and it's often difficult to prove that last one I touched on, right? Through IT forensics, they were breached because you were breached. It gets muddy there. But jumping to first party, and really why most people buy cyber insurance, they buy it to protect themselves. They buy it to protect their company, their first party. So whoever owns the policy, right? So again, security breach expense, privacy notification expense is going to pay to notify affected parties, investigate the cause of a breach with forensics, may provide identity protection or credit monitoring. The big thing here is business income and extra expense, right? While you're a sitting duck and you can't do business because your technology was breached, it will pay for your overhead, your net income, and continued operating expenses. It can also get into contingent business interruption, where maybe there's a key supplier or key manufacturer that you rely on, that can also pay kind of their business income expenses. If they have a breach, it would pay your business income expenses. Extortionware, extortion, threat, ransom payment, rewards payment, fines and penalties. Cyber insurance can pay fines and penalties. And then again, the PR, public relations, crisis management, also to replace your hardware or data. So that's all what you're actually getting post breach. But it's also important to look at policies for pre-breach services, right? So a lot of these policies have a ton of free cyber risk mitigation tools. A lot of them have cybersecurity portals, online tools, a way to gauge the likelihood and severity of a breach. We'll actually take a look at one. Maybe training videos or worksheets or tips for employees, data breach response planning tools, and even some free pre-breach data breach response consulting. So it's really nice for kind of constrained IT and cybersecurity budgets to actually see what your policy comes with. So just a couple quick questions to ask about, my potential coverage or my current coverage. Are rogue employees or insider threats covered? Do you have a say in legal counsel, or does the carrier have that right to use which legal counsel they have on panel? Do you have any sublimits in your policy? That phishing, social engineering, somebody clicked on a link, kind of cyber crime coverage could be sublimited. Often you can only get $100,000 or $250,000 of coverage, while you might have $1 million policy. Are the defense costs within the policy limits or outside? What's your first party level of coverage? What's your third party level of coverage? Sometimes people think they have $1 million of both and they might have 0 of one. So not all policies are created equal. Getting into kind of why you would consider one, applying is a risk management exercise. You saw a snip of the application, so you get a good idea of the current cyber hygiene of the company. You're probably not covered, right? General liability insurance has been around for 100 years, before the internet existed, and there's just tons of exclusions in there for electronic data. There's no coverage for forensics expenses, credit monitoring, reputational harm, any of those things kind of we touched upon. The crime coverages are very, very limited. A business owner's package might only have $10,000 of coverage. It's quite affordable. A multi-million-dollar company can get a very robust policy for probably just a couple $1,000s a year. I put required in apostrophes there. It's not mandated to purchase a policy, but some of the things the policy will pay for are required to do, like the notification and such. A lot of customers, especially in the government contracting, healthcare, and finance industries, are requiring it. I actually have I deal with a lot of any franchises, and they're even looking at requiring franchisees for retail facilities, just selling pretzels to carry it. So it's really becoming quite broad in not really being forced federally, but contractually with customers. And of course, accidents happen. No one's 100% secure, and really it gives you a one-stop shop of where to go. So we're about 40 minutes in. I just wanted to share quick 2 tools with you, and then I'll open it up to questions if anyone wants to stick around. One is called "Have I Been Pawned" or "Pwned." I don't know how to pronounce that, but I will bring that up here on my other screen, and I'll put in one of my junk emails from when I was younger, b.mahone6@yahoo.com, and you could just go to this website up here, and it will tell you the credentials that are out there for sale on the dark web. So, I used to order books in college through Chegg, so they suffered a data breach where my email is attached. You ever played Words with Friends on Facebook? Zynga's been hacked. And there was another 8tracks, part of GitHub, is how you logged in. They were also hacked. So that was pretty cool. And then the cyber risk index is also very valuable, and I often use it with customers. Again, it's free, so just go to chubbcyberindex.com. I like to customize a report, and I already pulled the report, but let's just say we're a $3 million consulting, B2B consulting firm, and we want the last 3 years of data of our peers and competitors of basically who's been hacked. So let me pull this up here, uh, and it will spit out a PDF. You can download it, you can email it, and this is what it looks like. So ABC consulting firm, you'll see these are the parameters I put in. The professional services industry, the growth has gone up about 600% in the last 3 years as compared to the overall global cyber incident breaches. And it's saying, who are these bad people? They're coming mainly externally of our network, and they're getting in through social engineering, 35%, brute kind of hacking, malware for another 40%. And then if I were to have a data breach, what costs would I incur? Well, the first party costs would be the most expensive, followed by forensics, so that kind of that business interruption loss. And our $3 million consulting firm, ABC Consulting, probably has about 4,000 or so personal financial, personal health information records, and we're roughly equating that to about $600,000 of cyber risk, right? So this ABC consulting firm, if they bought $500,000 cyber insurance policy, could be pretty confident that they might have enough coverage for a breach. If they bought $1 million, they could sleep easy at night. Their policy would probably respond to any situation they had, and the limits would not be exhausted. And then it breaks down kind of the costs. And then you can even see what are your peers and competitors looking at. Most of them are underinsured, no surprise. Less than $250,000 of coverage. Another third roughly have enough coverage, and then another, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10% are overinsured, and most of them have some sort of deductible under $10,000. So that kind of gets into how much, right? And if you did have any questions, we're at about the 36-minute mark, so roughly right on time. I will check the chat and then check my email, and feel free to let me open the microphones here as well. But thank you for your time. I'm available via email if you do think of something later. And if you do want to look into something that you currently have or something you don't have, feel free to reach out to us. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but I will try to unmute everybody as well. I have one question here. It says, Brian, how can I get a discount on my cyber insurance policy? I have personal insurance, and you can bundle home and auto and save 10%. I get this question a lot, and the answer is yes. If you do have very good cybersecurity controls in place, you will get preferred treatment from underwriters. But it's not quite as simple as bundle your home and auto and save 10%. There's kind of a swing, right, of maybe 5 to 30%, where company A has terrible controls, an underwriter is going to give them a higher premium, and company B same exact size industry, but has really good controls, they will certainly get a discount. How much of a discount is really hard to tell, because a lot of times the cyber insurance policies are underwritten specifically based off the application at that time. Perfect. Well, I don't see any other questions. If you did have one and you missed it, I'll put my email again in the chat. And thank you so much for joining.